And hello, everyone. Here we are with Joseph Conyers, probably the busiest man in music. I'm just going to read off, hopefully, an accurate bio about Joseph. After graduating from Curtis, he went to the Grand Rapids Symphony as principal bassist, and then to the Atlanta Symphony, and then assistant bass of the Philadelphia Orchestra until this past year, where he became the principal bass. While doing that, he's also the BUTI artistic director, founder slash or visionary of Project 440, and faculty at Juilliard and Temple University. Joseph has a twin sister who played cello, older brother who played violin, and they all were raised through the Suzuki method. And he has a very successful Instagram where he goes by the username Weatherclef because of the relation that weather has to music for him, but also because he was actually planning on possibly becoming a meteorologist. So just starting there, Joseph, I want to ask you, what was the point where you decided that music would be the thing that you pursued for the rest of your life?
Great question, and thanks for having me on. This will be fun. So it wasn't clear cut for me because I'm pretty much a pragmatist, and I come from the South, and the South is not the North. And what I mean by that is there were not, unlike the Northeast corridor where there are lots of opportunities in music, there were some opportunities in music, but I just didn't know that much about that world. Neither was there a lot of energy around that world, except for the small community I was in. That was my teacher, my friends, and the little organizations we were a part of. So I always knew I loved music. I always knew I wanted it to be part of my life. As far as making a profession out of it, I did love weather, so I did consider becoming Weatherman Joe. That was a strong possibility. And I had the right people who encouraged me to do music, including my parents, because at one point I was thinking I would double major, and I did not go that path because they just decided that I should probably put all my focus in one thing instead of spreading myself too thin. For me, that's a personal thing, because I know people who have done dual majors in music. I mean, there are folks who go to Harvard and NEC at the same time getting dual degrees, so it can happen. NEC being New England Conservatory, for those who are unfamiliar with the the musician slang. So when basically once I got into Curtis, that kind of sealed the deal, and I was able to just focus on music for that portion of my life, and the rest worked out. The rest is history. So I always knew I wanted music to be part of my life. I don't remember learning music. It was always part of me. But to answer your question specifically, there wasn't like a turning point unless it's something like like an event, which was getting into Curtis, which was like, okay, fine, I'll do the music thing and see what happens.
And on that of like picking a conservatory over a university where you can kind of have more options, what would you say to a student who is applying for college and maybe their family wants them to apply to university? They support pursuing a music major, but they want them to have open options. But that student wants to go to conservatory because they want to do what you did, which is throw all the marbles in a conservatory setting. Would you say that you had no regrets doing that, or that you feel kind of deprived of a general education, or do you think that it's a good path to take if you're really serious about being a musician?
Great question. I feel like if I knew the exact answer to that for every single person, I would probably go into therapy and make a lot of money. And what I mean by that is everyone is completely different. So you kind of have to know yourself and allow yourself to have options if you need them. I knew having gone to summer music festivals where all you do is music all the time, I wasn't happy. So to me, going to conservatory would mean it would be like going to summer music festival all year round. So I would continue to be in heaven. That was great for me. I didn't need the social stuff. I didn't need a football game. I didn't need a baseball game. I didn't need the basketball game. I didn't need to go out at night and hang out and join a fraternity. I didn't need any of those things. If I had music and some folks to play it with, I was in a happy place. So for that reason, I was very happy in conservatory. Other people might want those things. Other people might want a life experience in the college where they're meeting folks who are outside of their discipline. These are all healthy things. Everyone's different. There is no exact choice. What I might recommend to someone if they're getting pressure from their parents and they also want to be in a conservatory environment is that there are a lot of schools now, or enough schools that are options where you could kind of have the conservatory experience while augmenting that with a university experience, because a lot of universities have really excellent music programs. So I would encourage that person to look at some of these schools with some very strong music programs that might be in a university setting, or even like a school like Oberlin. Oberlin has a conservatory, but it's also part of a larger college. So if one has to know themselves and balance that between what they might be hearing from the outside and what they want for themselves.
Great. Thank you for that response. In an interview that you've done, you kind of mentioned that after graduating from conservatory, or maybe your senior year, you were watching all of your peers get very successful jobs, and maybe you weren't winning as many auditions as they were, and that was very discouraging for you. You did go to Curtis, so I'm sure there was a sense of security there, knowing that at least you're like surrounded by the top level musicians in the country. But for someone who maybe isn't at the Curtis caliber, or maybe even is at the Curtis caliber, what would your advice be to them if they feel behind in how they compare to their peers in music school?
Okay, I always felt behind. I think I still feel behind, to be honest. I think that's one of the reasons I work the way that I do. I try to work hard always. The grass will always seem greener. It will always seem greener. It'll always be like, oh, I missed out on that. Oh, I didn't get to do that. Oh, I didn't. And because of that, it's easy for folks to spiral in this thought process of I'm not good enough or I'm not I would encourage everyone who has those thoughts to do the best they can to put those thoughts aside. Let's start there. That's one. Two, great musicians come from everywhere. Yes, there are many great musicians who have graduated from the Curtis Institute of Music. There are many great musicians who have graduated from many schools all around the country. And for example, I played in the Philadelphia Orchestra that has a lot of Curtis, but it's not all Curtis. So understanding that everyone is on a different journey. The timing is going to be different for everyone. There's a little bit of luck involved, so that you have to find that place where luck meets preparation. You want to use your social signals. I have a colleague of mine, Yumi Kendall, who we share a podcast called Tacit No More. Yumi says, follow the green lights in life. If you're taking lots and lots of auditions and you're always making it to the finals, that's a really, really strong green light. If that's not happening, what can you do so you can start to see more of those green lights? Because those green lights will help you ascertain what you might ultimately want to do and what your next step will be in life. So I would say for any student who's in another school, everyone's going to have to work hard. Everyone's going to have to work really hard, whether they're at Curtis or they're a local community college. And I would encourage everyone to work really, really hard, because that's just honestly what it takes. If you're going to music at the level that I play in an orchestral setting, it's not really different from going into professional sports. The Olympics are going on right now. Sorry to date this, but the Olympics are going right now, and you see these folks who are putting everything they can for these experiences. And so we have to, regardless of where we are, understand, is this the path we want to take? Are we putting in that time? Are we getting the green lights? And then finally, I'll say, are we surrounding ourselves with the folks who can give us the insight to make sure the feedback we're getting is actually going to help us get to the next level, make that next step. If you have those things in your life, and are continuing to work hard, going to auditioning for music festivals in the summertime, trying to get into the best music festivals, like always kind of pursuing, then and you have the green lights, then yes, I think anyone can find themselves in a position where they could be playing in an orchestra or principal of an orchestra, but you just have to put in the work, and it's a lot of work.
I think that answer was really reassuring to me personally. I'm sure a lot of other people will find it that way too. There are two things that really stood out to me. One, the green light and needing to adjust if you're not really seeing the green lights that you expect.
Correct.
But also the fact that someone like you who has the dream job of probably every bassist out there can still feel inferior sometimes, I think is just shocking. And I want to ask you, do you think that that I guess inferiority complex can be intrinsic motivation? Does it have any positive value at all, or is it something that you should totally push to the side and try to find positive ways to push yourself?
I think the thing about an inferiority complex is the fact that the realization that a lot of people have it, then you realize, once you realize you aren't alone, then it's a lot easier. I know, like, particularly in the orchestra setting, there's a lot of like, oh, I'm not afraid of anything. And there's a lot of confidence. And we honestly, our training helps us build that confidence. So one of the things that can help with the inferiority complex is making sure that in your journey, you're putting yourself in situations where you are being challenged, where you can hear that voice and go against that voice and be very confident. Because that's like practicing or like lifting weights. I think that's a muscle too, that after it gets strong enough, it can actually fight off that inferiority complex so that it can stay at bay. If it's intrinsic motivation, I feel like it's more with yourself. Like, you're going to prove to yourself that you can do this thing, but I feel like that could be a little slippery, because then you have an internal battle, and internal battles can just be annoying. I feel like it's better to think more that we're all human, and that people all make mistakes. Like, and if you give yourself that grace and that space, then it allows you to soar and play and perform at your highest. I mean, people have inferiority complex for different reasons. I will tell you, for me, as I said, as I started this interview, I came from Savannah, Georgia, a much smaller town, not New York City. The other bass player who got in, I think both bass players actually, there are two bass players who got in Curtis that year. One was from New York, who had done Juilliard prep and was working with orchestras every week and learning excerpts. I'd hardly played barely any excerpts by the time I started. So I definitely had that sense of having an inferiority complex, but to that end, I wasn't working against myself. I was just working to keep up with the Joneses. And so I saw that as a challenge. So does it make sense? I use the external factors to go, oh, if that's where everyone is, then that's where I have to make myself and go beyond that. And then again, that helps you build confidence, and that allows you to go into situations confidently, and then hopefully stave off that inferiority complex. So it's very true. Like me, I've had the job now for a year as principal bass, and I took my teacher's chair, and my teacher, legendary, Howard Robinson, principal bass for about 25 years with the Philadelphia Orchestra, taught the best bass players, many of the best bass players in the country, principals all around the world. And so there's a lot that comes with that, just mentally and emotionally, to carry that weight. But I've learned to lean in, and I know I worked very, very hard in school, and I can trust that to help me as I continue in this new path, new journey as principal.
So what I'm understanding is you're kind of recommending that you keep it at bay, but use it as positive motivation and kind of a challenge to kind of set goalposts in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I think, or I think more important than even than that is realizing that everyone is human, and that while there are some crazy, I mean, humanity comes with the spectrum. There are some people who just seem to do everything without thinking. I'm more jealousy of that than anything else. But a lot of us are just trying to make it, and the more you realize that everyone has these anxieties, that there are other folks in the orchestra who I know folks in orchestras now, professional orchestras, who even as professionals still take beta blockers. For those who know what beta blockers are, these are things to help calm folks. I encourage you to look it up and talk to a doctor because it's definitely something that's prescribed, but it helps keep folks calm when they're very nervous. I say that because they're getting nervous, even as professionals. So, everyone is different. And I think if you realize realize that everyone is going through it. And because everyone's going through it, how do you then deal with it? Because I just feel like there's safety in numbers. I feel better when I know I'm with a bunch of humans. And while people in orchestras might seem like they're perfect, they can do no wrong, we are not perfect. And we sometimes can do wrong. So that makes it easier. And to build up that confidence is, again, practicing putting yourself in a situation as you're learning where you can prove yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In a less stressful situation. It might start off by playing for your friends. Then it might go next to playing for, I don't know, going to a community center for some kids. And then maybe playing at a senior citizen home. Because all these things will help build your confidence and help keep that inferiority complex at bay. Because you're like, I can do this. I can do this.
Yeah. On that last point you made about like kind of performing as much as you can and just getting out there to build up your confidence. I recently had a master class with the principal cello of the LA Phil. And
Mr. Domain.
So I'm sure you know his story. He used to take drugs. He's very open about it. And it's shocking to me how like one of my heroes could be nervous. Because like to me it almost feels like it's impossible to be nervous when you're that amazing of a player. And I think,
and just to be clear, you mean drugs for performance. So this what I was talking about, like beta blockers, that kind of thing.
Right. I think he actually took like drugs, like hard drugs. Multiple.
Okay. There's that too.
Well, yeah, beta blockers is definitely more common though, and I guess more recommended than more.
But yeah, no, that's to your point. And I've worked with him. I don't know if he knows me, but I've worked with him. I think I worked with him I can't remember where. He's a terrific player. He's a really, really beautiful. And it's so funny you say that because he plays with a confidence like he can do no wrong, and it's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, moving back to the second question I had from the previous question, which is about the green light and what to do when you're not seeing those green lights. Could you give what would your step process be? Let's say you're back in college, you're applying for the Grand Rapids Symphony, you're applying for the Atlanta Symphony, but you're not getting past the first round. What are some adjustments you would make?
Great question. I mean, again, I'm a pragmatist, so I'll speak for myself. I'm not saying this is what other people should do. I would say I would do a real examination of, okay, something is awry, something's not working, obviously. Now, here's the deal. You can't do it off of one audition because auditions are dumb. And what I mean by this, auditions can sometimes be, if you're blue and they want red, no matter how well blue plays, red won't like you. Does that make sense? So you can't use one audition and have it ruin your world because that's a lot. But if you're taking a series of auditions and nothing is happening, then you can start to really do a strong self-assessment of like, okay, well, what did my teachers say? What feedback? Because the other thing, if your teacher's saying you're doing perfectly, you're doing everything right, but it's not coming out, then something is awry or amiss. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And whether something is amiss, I don't know what it is, but if someone's saying you're doing perfectly and the results aren't showing perfection in that regard, to me, there's something amiss. So it might mean having a real conversation with one's teacher. The other thing is, how much are you exposing yourself to the outside world? It's very easy, I think, in music, particularly if you're at a school that's not, let's say, in the middle of nowhere, to not know what's really out there and what's competitive. So this is where, before you get to trying to get green lights from orchestras, get green lights from music festivals. Where are you applying? Does that make sense? What music festivals are you getting into? Because hopefully by the time you're taking orchestra auditions, you would have climbed that ladder. So what I'm saying is, you probably shouldn't be like a rising sophomore in college and then taking auditions and saying what's going on. It is a progression. So, because at music festivals, there's lots of opportunities. There's speeding auditions. How am I ranking in there? And if it's not where you want to be, why is that the case? You can consult your teacher, pay for other teachers, get other opinions. And just like I said, with auditions, every opinion's not going to be the right opinion. But what you can do is try to get how can you say, like almost like a survey of opinions that will then allow you to then, what's the common thread between those opinions that are given? Because someone might say something one end and someone's going to say something the opposite in the spectrum. What you want to focus on is what is the common denominator amongst all the things that people are telling you. And to me, those are the little things that can get you to the point that when you're taking an audition, hopefully you have enough data. Honestly, that's what it is, to ascertain whether you're in the content in the realm of advancing or not. Does that make sense? Everything is very movable and flexible, so it's hard. There is no set thing. And I wish there were, because then I would just tell people that and I'd make a lot of money because I'd always be right. But I hope that makes sense. And if you are, let's say, out of school and you are doing the auditions and you're running into this wall, some people call it a wall, and you aren't studying with a specific teacher, that's when you really do want to play for more professionals to see what that common denominator is to help you get to that next step. I mean, for some people, it might even be the audition itself. They'll get so nervous they can't perform at their best. So then what interventions are you putting in so that when you get really nervous, you can still perform at your best or close to it? Because that's another thing. I know that's something I struggled with. I would get really upset because I could play it in the practice room. I was doing great. One thing I wasn't doing enough of was practicing the audition, practicing getting nervous, finding folks who made me really nervous and playing for them. I mean, a lot of us don't want to do that because we're human. We don't want to expose ourselves at our most fragile, at our most vulnerable. But as a musician, that's exactly what you have to do. So put yourselves in these situations where it's uncomfortable, where you are vulnerable, and be open to criticism and be able to take that, digest it, and turn it into something that will make your playing better.
Thank you for that. When you were auditioning for the Atlanta Symphony, you were currently in Grand Rapids, right?
Yes.
And I don't know much about Grand Rapids, despite actually have been there once. It was Grand Rapids, Michigan. Besides Interlochen and I guess University of Michigan, I think Grand Rapids is kind of far away from like a big music scene. You were principal bass of Grand Rapids, and not meaning that you're necessarily better than everyone else, but it may have been hard to find mentorship from bass players who kind of had significantly more experience than you.
Yep.
I want to ask, how often did you play for other bass professionals leading up to your Atlanta Symphony audition? And also, how did you find people to play for?
That's a great question. That's really good. And it dovetails off the last answer I just gave you. You have to find your tribe. When you're in school or when you're in a community, you have to find your musical tribe. And what I mean by that, you have to find the people you trust completely. And to be honest, most of them, for me, were not bass players. Because when you're playing for an audition committee, yes, there are bass players on that committee, but there might be a bassoon player, there might be a violin player, there might be a horn player, there might be a percussionist. So expanding for whom you are playing, finding those folks who will tell you without reservation if you don't sound good. You just have to find them. And I in Grand Rapids in particular, I had one specific buddy I played for all the time. We played for each other all the time because we trusted each other's ears and we trusted each other's feedback. That's so important. 1, 2. The advent of technology was just continuing to evolve because I won Grand Rapids Symphony almost 20 years ago. So the cell phone and smartphones were literally just hopping onto the scene. I can't tell you the resources that young musicians have now where you can hop on a Zoom and play for someone. Before Zoom, it's so funny. I'm even thinking about this. I would play for friends, sometimes using Skype or just even over the phone on speaker. But literally, but all this to say, we've come a long way. So because you could be in, I don't know, in the middle of Uzbekistan. If you have a Wi-Fi signal, you can play for almost basically anyone in the world. So you can stay connected. You can be inspired by folks you see online. You can see, there are courses and people playing all the time. I think you mentioned my what's it called? My Instagram page. I don't know if you mentioned that on this before we start to, but there are players out there where you can see. So between seeing the knowledge, obtaining that knowledge, working within yourself, and then using that community to help continue to push yourself further. That was probably one of the best things that I did in Grand Rapids. And I played for a lot of people, and I didn't really take lessons after I got my job because I was a little weird in that when I graduated, I felt like I knew everything I needed to do. I just had to learn to do it. So that time outside of graduation and moving forward was basically spent in continuing to work my level of playing to meet the bar that I had in my head. So that coupled with my friends, and so that's how I was able to do it. Same thing in Atlanta. Honestly, same thing here in Philadelphia. If I have something coming up, I play it for folks. Because I'm always, as a musician, you should always be pushing yourself. There's no place where you feel like, even again, as principal bass of the orchestra, when I won the principal job, I was speaking to another principal, and it was really reassuring to me because they were telling me, like, when they won the job, like, even now, they're doing their step check exercises, bowling exercises. They're doing their scales and arpeggios. They're trying to be at the top of their crafts because they understand what comes with being principal in the orchestra means. So we're always learning. And I think if you keep that mindset, regardless of where you end up, you can always use the things around you to push yourself forward. That's what. And 2, I'm going to end that segment by saying this. When I was in Grand Rapids, I didn't know if that was going to be the last job I ever won. And I will tell you, I gave Grand Rapids everything. I did not treat Grand Rapids less than, even if I have some friends who want a job in Boston Symphony or in the New York Philharmonic, I didn't say, well, Grand Rapids is less than that. It was just another orchestra. So what I mean by that is, even when I was there, I was on a few sub lists, but if there was a subscription concert with I wasn't going to ask for time off. I was going to be in Grand Rapids because Grand Rapids was paying my bills, and I was going to give Grand Rapids what Grand Rapids deserved and what they were paying me for. And I say this only because it's very easy to say, oh, well, I'm not in the orchestra I want, so I'm going to keep focusing on that orchestra while negating the experience you're having in the current orchestra you're in, which to me, I think can be detrimental to, honestly, your relationships and your own playing, your own mindset. Because if you're always looking to try to do something else, that means you can't appreciate what you have in the now. Which means, honestly, it might actually hamper your growth. If you're always like, oh, I gotta have this or I gotta have this. And the last thing I'll say on that end is your friends, everyone has a different path. Some people will be winning jobs right away. Other people, it takes longer to win their first job. And again, some of it's luck, but everyone's on a different journey. So if you're always comparing yourself to others in that way, again, that could be a distraction for your own goal and for your own journey. Don't let that stuff be a distraction, because if it does, you may not get nearly as far along as you want. And I will tell you, once I was as comfortable as I possibly could be, I bought a place in Grand Rapids. I built out my relationships. I was working at Santa Fe Opera. Like, everything was perfect. I went to Atlanta. and yeah. So I hope that helps. That was a long answer to your question, but there are lots of rabbit holes one can go down when answering a question like that.
Fantastic response. Thank you so much. I think towards the end, I mean, there's so much that I could unpack. Like you said, there's kind of rabbit holes everywhere, but I find it interesting, at least me personally, about constantly like pushing yourself to try to do different things, which might actually hinder you because you might be spreading yourself too thin, or you're not giving yourself the time to kind of, I guess, develop their abilities. Maybe at your level, you have already gotten past most of the technique development stage. But I think for a lot of young musicians, I think there's like a huge ambition to go for the next big thing, the best festival we can get into. But then when you're at that festival, you might not have the time to hone your skills the same way you might at a different festival. And I know that something that you say in a lot of your interviews, and that's even on your website, is, I guess, to paraphrase by Nike, is just do it. Like, just do it. But I think you also like kind of mentioned the fact that it's also important to plan things out, and make sure that whatever you're doing it intentionally, and clearly you live by that, because everything you've built was obviously not just sporadic. You had to really think it through. I want to ask you, how do you strike that balance between taking a step back and really evaluating how you're going to do something, as opposed to just going in and doing what needs to be done? Because I think there's two sides of the spectrum where sometimes people do too much of just jumping right in, but then sometimes people do too much evaluating and kind of enter a analysis paralysis.
Yeah. Good question. I would say, like, for me, try to keep yourself involved in the things that you love doing, not the things that you don't love doing. People will ask you to do things that you don't love doing, and you can say no to those people. Now, if you have an issue saying no to those people and you crowd yourself with a whole bunch of stuff that you don't want to actually do, that will inhibit the things for your ability to do the things you actually do want to do. Does that make sense? So being able to, one, say no, but two, know the things that bring you joy and that will fulfill you. I think, like, even all my projects have been based off of things that I really love. Whether it's my nonprofit, Project 440, whether it's working with the All City Orchestra and sharing music with young people, teaching regardless of the institution. I love teaching, and I could pour a lot of myself into that. And actually, it fuels me. Like, instead of getting tired, it kind of wakes me up. And if you can get yourself more involved in those things, and that will give you the fuel to want to do it. So that's one. Two, you do have to be organized and thoughtful about your approach and figure out what you can take on. I was young once, and when I was young, I wanted to take on the world. Say, well, why can't things just change? But I learned over time that there are these systems, and these systems can be pretty frustrating. I think the best analogy or the best example that we have is our own government. Things move so slowly because there are all these checks and balances to get things, so it can sometimes feel like nothing's actually happening. Learning, so instead of being mad at the system, learning how the system works and to work within the system to move things along. Because otherwise you'll spend a lot of time being frustrated at something you don't have control over, which is annoying. That would be annoying. I mean, it's like being frustrated at a mountain that it won't move out the way. Well, no matter how frustrated you get, the mountain is not going to move. So maybe you can put your energy in figuring out how you will get around the mountain. Does that make sense? And I mean, that's the same analogy that could be used for looking at folks. This is going back a question, but looking at folks who are doing things that you want to do but aren't doing because you're looking at the mountain, the thing, instead of figuring out your own path to get to the other side. So if you are passionate about the things that you do, you'll stay up longer at night to do them. You'll build more time. You'll spend less time on Netflix. You'll spend less time playing video games. Does that make sense? And here's the deal: if everyone can live their life, I'm not going to go after anyone who wants to live their life. What I'm trying to say is the keys to success in this way, and building out the life that you might want to live, might actually require a lot of work and attention from you. So you can't, it's hard to have your cake and eat it too. Like, say, I want to do all these things, I'm getting involved in all these things, I'm going to get really busy doing things I really don't like to do, and spend time doing things that actually aren't helping me thrive. I mean, we all need downtime, but I think you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and I think a concern that me and a lot of other young musicians have when starting a career in music is just how time-consuming it is.
It is.
I mean, it's almost like you lose whatever aspect of your life you had prior to starting music. Would you say that it's worth the sacrifice completely, or do you think that there are any, I guess, I don't want to say regrets, but maybe you would have done things differently. Maybe you would have spent less time doing a certain thing. Maybe you would have spent less time doing gigs and focusing just on getting an orchestral job. Or do you think it's all kind of worth it to get into like the, just throwing yourself into the world?
Yep. I'll keep going back to the fact I've said it numerous times. Everyone's life journey is going to be different. I will tell you, in my life, I have to pinch myself because even though I was frustrated oftentimes when I was younger, mainly for the reasons that the world won't change as fast as I wanted to, I feel like I'm not making the progress I want to make. Because I had the long goal in mind and I stayed focused, I was able to reach and achieve my goals. That takes a lot of self-discipline, which is great for any musician to have. And honestly, I could have made a lot of different choices. Who knows what I could have done? I mean, I don't know. But to do the things that I wanted to do, I feel like I made the right choices. And they say live a life with no regrets. I don't have any regrets. I mean, I had friends who said, Joe, you practice too much. And I was in college. So maybe I missed out on college life. But I wasn't interested in college life. I was interested in getting a job. So I knew the way I was going to have to get a job was to practice. And so that's what I had to do. Even if my friends weren't happy with that, but I wasn't living their life. I'm living my life. That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that and the gratitude of being thankful for what I did have. So I feel like that played a major role too. Just like I said in Grand Rapids, I wasn't looking to just leave and like say something's better. I was able to take it all in and say like I'm grateful for this, and I will make music to the best of my ability with whomever. And for Grand Rapids, I was 3.5 seasons. And I have zero, I mean, Grand Rapids was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me. I got principal experience. I was able to meet Norma, my bass, which was in Grand Rapids, a very, very, very fine, rare instrument. But had I not gone to Grand Rapids, the Grand Rapids Symphony paid for the bass. I had to pay them back interest-free, but they allowed me to acquire an instrument I could not afford. I had a concerto written for me in Grand Rapids. Does that make, I mean, if I had joined the Philadelphia Orchestra, but probably none of those things would have happened had I just jumped right in. So, I mean, just jumping into any kind of religious thinking, sometimes you just have to walk the path that you're meant to walk and walk it unabashedly, and things work out in the long run.
When you were walking that path, how did you deal with, I'm sure you had reservations at points, seeing your friends maybe work. Maybe it didn't seem like they were working as hard as you, but the results they were making were a lot better. How did you kind of have the ability to stay disciplined when you're working so hard but not getting the results that you wanted?
They're living their life. I'm living my life, and I'll follow my own green lights. You have to do it. That's how you do it. I know what it's like. I remember the feeling. I know, like into the center of my soul, where, and at some point in life, you see someone, they might do better in an audition, and like they didn't. You just have to. That's their path. I'm going to stay on my own. And I had enough green lights to let me know that what I was doing was correct. It wasn't incorrect. It just didn't work out this time. As I said, auditions are stupid. Auditions don't necessarily pick the best anything. They pick, I mean, between someone having a bad day and grading a certain way, and like you had all these things you don't have control over. So why put your energy in the things that you don't have control over instead of putting all your energy in the thing that you do, which is yourself? Does that make sense? And the more you can do that, the more you can become self-assured and move forward in the direction that will get you where you need to go. But I remember the feeling. I feel it now. Like you see the list come up, you're like, what? What just happened? But then you just have to use that as fuel to say, I'm going to stay in the straight and narrow. Because if you get distracted by that disappointment, that distraction can actually tear you down and steal some of your joy or steal some of your light or your desire to move forward. Don't let that happen. They're on their path. I can't. You're on your path.
Joseph, you're such an optimist. Remember the first time we met during the Yola summer project thing, and before the class had started, we're all like just doing our own thing, and I just heard your laughter from the Zoom meeting, and I was like, who is this guy just bringing such a positive vibe, even through Zoom? You're optimistic, and in one of your BTI interviews during the pandemic, Wendell asked you, I went to BUTI, so I know her. She asked you how like you were feeling about the future of classical music. Of course, this was 4 years ago, and back then you said you were really optimistic.
Yes.
Because it's kind of like a reset for all musicians.
Yes.
Me personally, it was a huge reset for my career. Before the pandemic, I wasn't planning on pursuing a music career. So 4 years later, how are you feeling about the direction that music has taken out of the pandemic?
There's still a lot of work to be done, Theodore. There's still so much work. but I'm still optimistic. And, I mean, mainly just because I feel like we haven't realized nearly our full potential. They say, I mean, how much of the brain, I mean, I went to music school, so I don't know, but how much of the brain they say we actually use is like, I don't know, 20%, 30 of our actual brain. That's the classical music industry. We're using about 10, 20, 30% of what we could do. And I'm excited about what if we utilize that other 70% about the lives we can change, the lives we can touch, the communities that we can become a part of, how we can literally use music to change the world, unite people, bring people together, help in equity and education. Like to me, all these things are possible. As an industry, we just have to decide that this is something we want to pursue and get out of the transition. I've been watching a lot of history videos as of late, which has been fascinating. But be part of the transition to get the thing to the next level. Because otherwise, things will kind of stay the same and someone else will decide your destiny. And classical music is, to me, in a position where someone else could decide our destiny. And I'm saying we should decide our destiny and take the reins and move it forward in a way that makes it more popular than ever before.
Mhm. You're already doing a lot with Project 440, clearly, but you're only one person, and your capabilities are limited to a certain extent. But if this was your dream world, you were God, you could just change classical music however you wanted. How would you like to see classical music change in the next 20 years or so?
Yeah, I think communities would look at their music institutions as a beacon of hope. Because what we do on the stage is the epitome of what a perfect society can be. We have a bunch of different people with a bunch of different opinions, with a bunch of different backgrounds coming together to create this beautiful thing. So I would see us utilizing that in a way that encourages communities to want to do the same thing. How we invite people in a hall, where we sit in our communities, because generally music institutions like an orchestra are some of the biggest cultural institutions in the surrounding area. So using that orchestra to facilitate conversations in the community so that, again, we can be that beacon for how the world can work. And then we end up being inspiration for everyone. And folks know about us because of that. Folks know about the orchestra because of the inroads we made in their communities by giving young kids a chance at life, at something outside of maybe they might feel it's outside of their realm of possibility, but we show them that it can be in their realm of possibility and provide them with a pathway to do it. I mean, I again, after reading all this history, I mean, artists, we get a bad rap, but at the end of the day, I feel like the creativity, that ability to think outside the box is the only thing that pushes society forward. Because otherwise, we're just a bunch of drones that do the same thing over and over again, and there is no progress. So how can we be that inspiration to all the folks around us so that instead of like the orchestra struggling for money, everyone's wanting to support the orchestra because it's so positive, it's such a positive force and a positive light in their community. That to me would be the ultimate goal. And I hope to see a portion of that sometime in my lifetime. That's what I'm working on.
That definitely sounds like a utopia one. Well, thank you, Joseph, so much for your time. I'm just going to interview off on a generic question.
Okay.
Because you're probably the busiest guest we've ever had. And of course, I appreciate you so much. I know we've been in contact for a long time and you've tried your best to accommodate me. So I really appreciate you coming here directly after your orchestra rehearsal. So here's the generic question. How do you do it? How do you maintain such a busy schedule? And what's like one thing that you've done that's helped you through all of it?
I think it's two. I think being physically active has been helpful, to be honest. 'Cause I think it allows me, it does two things. One, it allows me and gives me the energy to do things I need to do. But two, at night, I sometimes just pass out because I'm just tired. So it forces me to sleep. Whereas I feel like if I weren't so involved acting, my body didn't need the rest, I could push myself to a point where it could be detrimental. But my body will literally just shut off and I just have to sleep. And I don't do drugs myself. So I don't use things to stay awake. If the body's time to sleep, I let it go. So there's that. And then, yeah, I've always loved what I do. And a lot of time management, building the time. I'm frustrated some days, but I don't hate what I do. I realize I'm very fortunate to be able to say that. But I think the way I've lived my life has allowed me to get here, for which I'm very appreciative, and also allows me to make it very full. And these are the life choices I've made, because a lot of people would choose to be not 1/10 as busy as I am. But I like seeing things get done. I get a lot of gratification. I don't even need to see the students. I get a lot of gratification out of knowing I've made a difference and that someone is benefiting from that difference. And that's all. That's all I need.
Well, let me show gratitude to you for being here and also for everything you've done with Project 440. We talked about it before starting the recording, but I participated in 3 Project 440 programs. I'm not sure how many there are, but that's quite a bit. So
we have 4. The other one, the 4th, you have to be in Philadelphia to be a part of. So you did everything you could do.
Maxed it up. Thank you so much, Joseph. It was an honor to interview such a wonderful musician, such a wonderful person. And
you're very kind. Thank you. My pleasure.